Cataclysm, The First World War as Political Tragedy by David Stevenson. David Stevenson's Cataclysm, The First World War as Political Tragedy, is a dense, incredibly well-researched look at the conflict and offers many new views and important arguments. The book alternates between a grand military narrative of war to an economic interpretation to a penetrating view of the war's politics. Throughout, Stevenson considers these factors with all the major European belligerents, not simply Britain, France, and Germany, with a little commentary on Russia, Italy, and Austri-Hungary thrown in for good measure. The book paints many factors that contributed to the political tragedy referenced in the title. Perhaps the most important one was the belligerents' repeated failure to seek and secure peace after it became obvious to all that the war had unleashed an unprecedented level of death and destruction upon Europe. For the Germans, Stevenson notes, the continuance of the regime, and by extension the conservative Juncker system, depended upon annexations and at least the appearance that not so many had died in vain. The Western Allies were just as determined that Germany should not be rewarded for the war and refused to meet under any terms favorable to Germany. He writes, quote, "During 1917, war aims and peace diplomacy became so integral to the politics of the home front that these themes must be treated together." Stevenson makes some very interesting comparisons. For instance, he notes that what Russia was to the Allies, Austria-Hungary was to the Central Powers. Both nations depended upon subsidies from their stronger allies, both barely managed to continue the war as it dragged on into 1916 and 1917, and both regimes feared the revolutionary discontent within their empires. When both nations indicated that they would be agreeable to a separate peace, both were rebuffed by their enemies whose hardline terms made the idea of breaking ranks with their own allies anathema. Quote, "Nor could they achieve a general peace by moderating their partners' objectives." Stevenson's treatment of the strategic and operational spheres of war are likewise fascinating. Engagements such as Ludendorff's 1918 offensives are given great consideration, as are the BEF's disastrous attacks at Ypres the preceding year. The reader also appreciates the description of the initial German invasion of France in 1914, which is presented with vivid imagery and great detail. I must confess that I really like that Stevenson referred to Sir John French merely as Sir John. As someone who has read dozens of books on World War I, it is still quite confusing to see references to French alongside references to the French. Stevenson brilliantly gets around that confusion with his simple solution. All told, Cataclysm, The First World War as Political Tragedy, is a fine work that will greatly enhance the reader's understanding of the conflict. At times, it does seem as though Stevenson does take too long and go off on tangents, and the reader does lose interest. With that being said, this is a brilliant work overall, and one that serious students of the Great War, 1914 to 1918, must read.